The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand, and we gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise, to get what we want, we got to organize.
Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Pantsula Podcast, brought to you by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. For those who are not familiar with the A-APRP, we were founded by Kwame Nkrumah, the great Kwame Nkrumah, in 1968. And our objective is Pan-Africanism. And actually, we're going to talk about that today as part of our episode. And the way we define that is by a totally liberated and unified Africa under scientific socialism. Today, I have my fellow comrades with me, Jesse and Evan, on this episode. In every episode, we like to dedicate to one of our ancestors, and those two being Kamara of the PDG and Julius Nyerere. So once again, just a kind of overview, we'll be talking about the necessity of Pan-Africanism. So for one, as I stated earlier, what our objective or what we define Pan-Africanism as, which is the objective of a totally liberated, unified socialist Africa. We know that there's different versions of it, and people look at it as, an ideology, or people look at it as just a cultural return to African-centered stuff, essentially, right? So maybe let's talk about, how we define it within the A-APRP, and, why do we think that this is, why do we think that this is probably the most reasonable objective out of all the ones that are out there and all the other definitions of Pan-Africanism?
Oh, for one, just as a background of why that is our definition is it comes from the Fifth Pan-African Congress that was held in Manchester, England, in 1945. So they obviously started off in 1900. The first was called the First Pan-African Congress, and then afterwards there were Pan-African Congresses afterwards. And the thing that separated the Fifth Pan-African Congress from the rest was that, for one, a bulk of the attendees were from the African continent, whereas before they were either like petty bourgeois or like otherwise middle class Africans in the United States or some in the Caribbean. And also it was made up more of like labor and left wing or socialist and communist Africans and a general working class flavor to it. And it's pretty much a who's who of Pan-Africanism, certainly in the second half of the 20th century. W. Du Bois who set up the first four, even though he wasn't the director of it. He was there. You have Kwame Nkrumah, George Padmore, Jacques Garvey. Who else? You can go check it out. We'll have a link about it in the description. So read more about that. And again, it's about the return, like the unification of Africa, and the background coming after the Second World War, or the Second World Imperialist War, and which created material conditions that allow for the request and demand for not only self-determination within the confines of empire, but actual independence and self-determination. So right afterwards, a lot of parties, like the Conventional People's Party, the PDG, the Parti Démocratique de Guinée, and other parties were there they end up being the government parties that led independence. So I think it's a fitting goal and background to fight for it. Like, you actually have something that's determined. Like, we want the land. We want
land. Yes.
Exactly.
That's
yes, all revolution.
That's what this Pan-Africanism, total liberation, scientific socialism. because, as you guys mentioned, Africa is divided. And so our mission is just to bring that together, unifying that through socialism.
Yeah. And just as both of you guys were saying, it's echoing some of the sentiments. We define our version of Pan-Africanism as an objective as defined by the Fifth Pan-African Congress. Essentially, that was coordinated by the likes of George Padmore, W.B. Du Bois, and attendees like Kwame Nkrumah. I'm slipping on which Garvey wife was there. I think it was Amy, right?
Amy.
Yeah, Amy. Yeah, it was Amy. Yeah.
They're both Amy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, once again, kind of what everyone's saying, stating those first four initially that were taking place, the first four Pan-African Congress was kind of more bourgeois, essentially. Kwame Nkrumah talks about it in his autobiography. That the first four wasn't centered around the people. It was really centered around just the petty bourgeois, essentially. But this one was considered to have essentially like workers and people that were trying to express the elements of the people and their needs and wants. And they all understood that for Africa to be free and be under egalitarian type of system, more equitable, it will have to be under socialism, essentially too. And it has to be unified. Africa has to be unified for us to achieve our objective. We can't stand in isolation and expect that, to achieve anything in regards to our objectives. So yeah, and that's how we defined our objective of Pan-Africanism. So I guess my other question would be, in regards to the current state and, certain people who believe that, okay, we could do this on our own and we don't need to interlink the struggle. Is that true? And, why or why not do we find that to not be true?
It's certainly not true. We're anti-capitalist. We don't believe we can work with capitalism. We are socialists, and we believe in dialectical materialism, but we understand that we can't work with the system. So many people have tried. That's been proven to not be efficient. We know that the two economic systems, socialism, capitalism, what rules, socialism definitely does. Capitalism has just proven itself not to be a method that is in the interest of the African masses. And so, this whole idea that we can work with the system that is dominant right now has just not proven to be ready. But I think it's just interesting to see how capitalism, since we're in late stage capitalism, how it's reacted to forces standing up against it. And we've just seen the pressure come hard against the masses of the people crying out against just this oppression, from Haiti to what's going on here and the snakes. So clearly there's a movement, and that can only be strengthened if we organize and understand the necessity of Pan-Africanism, not being just distracted by all of the hype and all these other movements that distract us from unifying. Like we talked about in our episode, contested zones, and we are still, Africa's divided. That's the reality. And if we're not unified, then we're going to continually individualize our experiences, and it'll just create further confusion.
And you think about another point that the enemy forces, even if they do have some disagreements, they're pretty unified. And the name might be different. It could be called the European Union. It could be called NATO. It could be called the IMF. It will be called the World Bank. It will be called the WHO. The WHO, not the band, but
WHO,
World Health Organization,
CDC.
It'll be called Voice of America. It'll be called Agent Presse. It could be Le Monde. It could be Die Welt, whatever you want. So they're going to unify. And like you think about the European Union, even though like you have stuff like the European debt crisis and also like the anti-immigration like right-wing populist wave, there's still some unity of like, hey, we want to make sure that we either work with or compete the United States or the UK after Brexit, or Russia or China or whomever. They want, like, there is unity in some ways, and it makes sense to have unity among Africans. So
yes,
there you go.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think people have to understand interest. One, obviously we have to understand history, the historical context of all these things. And then two, I think most importantly is to understand where interest lies. Because obviously us being divided serves the interest of the imperialists and colonialists, neo-colonialists, because they could be able to further exploit Africa and its resources and its people if they keep us divided, if we're not unified, right? So we see historically, right, that and I think we have to also make sure, I think I mentioned this before in our last few episodes, just making sure we're not replicating failure. We've seen historically when we won fights and won struggles is been through unifying, right? Algeria provided aid to, the likes of like Samora Machel and their movement, MPLA, so forth and so on. You have Tanzania, I can't say it. I'm like tongue twister right now. Tanzania, yeah. Well, Julius,
with the ancestor we just named.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the ancestor we just named, Julius Nyerere. Providing aid to certain struggles. You have, the PDG and Stokely Ture providing aid to the PAIGC in their struggle, right? To the point where, even when Amilcar Cabral was assassinated by, the indigenous forces within the struggle, he came and, was able to lock up those, the killers, right? He was able to get them sentenced or whatever, right? If it wasn't for that, who would have known that Guinea would, because it was at the cusp of gaining their freedom. So if he didn't interject, so he didn't provide refuge to the PAIGC, because their home base essentially was in Conakry. So if he didn't provide that assistance, what would have happened is, at the midst of Amilcar Cabral, one of their only leader, really, but the strongest leader, if they would have went on and went back to Guinea-Bissau and started, a coup or whatever, what would have happened? But that actually goes to show the example, like, the unity is there, and it's always about internationalizing the struggle too as well. That the Panthers understood you got to internationalize it. Malcolm X understood this, and so many other Africans on the Western Hemisphere and throughout the diaspora understood this, that, we're weak because Africa is weak. Africa is the center. If we're politically unified, and Nkrumah will tell you this to his face is blue, right? It's like, we can't achieve anything until Africa is unified. And that's essentially true. You think about any strong people, they have a base, and that base is tied to a land. Yeah, exactly. Every revolution, definitely, anything is tied to land. I guess maybe we can even talk about some of the historical movements that happened under the guise of Pan-Africanism. We talk about Garvey, Du Bois. Maybe you could be talking about, if you have your favorite Pan-Africanist, revolutionary or intellectual, whatever the case is. Maybe you can mention that as well.
So many.
Yeah.
Malcolm X, we talked about him. We talked about many of them in our previous episodes, but anyone who's just really going back to land and returning us to that source, because there's just been so many intentional distractions, I feel, to just change that conversation. And that's caused so much confusion. And that's kind of where we're getting all of this misplacement of thought as it relates to just kind of where we come from, because we were taken from our Africans were taken from Africa, and being taken away from our mother like that, and then being placed in a neo-colonial state where we're then given all of these horrible atrocities from capitalism, patriarchy, all of these things that have just made us worse off. So like, if we don't have that education, that political education and understanding of just who we are, where we come from, and just the history, the ancestors that have already put in the work, there's just so much, tendency to believe we can settle with what we're given, because, it's easy to get a symbolic token of progress or some sort of like, easy way of saying, oh, we've actually incorporated. The more we incorporate in the system, the more we can change. But as you were speaking to, Jeffrey, we have to internationalize our struggle, understanding that the system that's oppressing us in the snakes is the same system oppressing others in a diaspora, and not having that understanding and thinking that it's just us and it ain't, that just it creates so much confusion.
I think you have to go back to one of the biggest victories for Africans is the Haitian Revolution, Revolution of AD. It was once, let's say, able to defeat the French, the Spanish, other troops, the Germans. Once they were able to defeat it, then in the Constitution you would say if you're an African, if you're a slave African, either in the Snakes or elsewhere in the Caribbean or else in South America, and you land in Haiti, you're free. It didn't matter if you were in Georgia. It didn't matter if you were in Jamaica. It didn't matter if you're in Barbados. It didn't matter if you're Cuba. It didn't matter if you're Brazil or whatever. If you got to Haiti, you're free. And you can't get any more African that to have control of the land of African people. So of course it had its contradictions, but you still have to look at that example as understanding that it didn't make sense to say, oh, you're Congo, you're from Congo, I don't want to work with you, or you're from your Fula, you're Yoruba, whatever. You want to get you free. You want this land, so we're gonna fight for it. We're gonna invoke the ancestors, invoke what the best, like the synthesis of the indigenous beliefs, as well as what the Europeans tried to force on us. So you gotta use that to the best of your ability, and boom, hello.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, man. And I think as of recent, we've been learning about the Garvey movement and the UNIA and Universal Negro Improvement Association, African Conference League. Just learning about that and learning he had like 6 million members, part of the organization. The greatest one, in my opinion, the greatest organizer, in African history, because I don't know if we've ever been able to replicate 6 million until today. So he's definitely, one of my favorites in regards to that. I know, although I have some ideological struggles with Garvey in general, I'm just put that out there, but, I still think he definitely did. He made a big contribution to the struggle in organizing us and essentially, and, once again, I sound like a broken record, but man, the PAIGC, PDG, those are like two of my favorites, the struggles that happened, Guinea-Bissau and Guinea. Mil Carcabral, more especially, like the more I read about him, it's like, man, that guy was like amazing, truly. Yeah, theorist, agricultural scientist. He just, man, he was just a brilliant minded. I actually was just literally reading something like right before, and how he reached out to Cuba for aid and stuff like that. Well, he reached out to the Global South for aid in the struggle. And, just the way he went about it, he was like a military tactician, the way he just went about everything, the way he went about the struggles, and, he's like, everything was very well thought out, in the way he did it. And it's sad to hear that, or know that he got killed, like within like less than a year before they got before they became liberated. Yeah. So it's, but man, I think,
the revolution.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Behind just what he, enforced with dignity, reminding us of our dignity, and just knowing that we come from a people that have always fought. This is not a myth. This is not like just recently. The history follows through. So, just the amount of, and that just goes to show you the best way you can honor that is to continue that work, which is what we hope to do and what we encourage all of you who are listening to do, joining an organization and just developing that political education and understanding why we must go by any means necessary and fight for this thing, because the powers that be is what's causing this oppression. And if the more we are aware and in tune to just how these systems work and we develop our analysis, we can grow stronger and bring more people into this to defeat this thing. But it can't be done on our individual effort. And all of the people we're talking about understood the importance of that.
Yeah. And I think also too, maybe something else we could get into, maybe it's like a 2-on-1, but since it's top of mind, I guess I'll just jam pack this question. Hopefully it's not too much, but I think of like, you know, there's a lot of like myths around Pan-Africanism. Maybe you can cover that. You know, the myths that people like to throw on there, or the misunderstandings of it. And then also the various struggles between, you know, people who, you know, tout like Black nationalism versus cultural nationalists and, you know, the Pan-Africanists. Like maybe we could talk about those struggles as well, and kind of unpack that a little bit too. Hopefully I didn't throw too much on everyone's plate, but hopefully I remember myself. I'll be having bad memories sometimes.
No problem. I think, I think regardless of your stance on Pan-Africanism, whether you're a Pan-African socialist or a Pan-African nationalist, or you want to talk about cultural nationalism, or you talk about some economic, whatever, that you have to understand that the history, like for one, you have to understand, like as we talked about before, with regards to enemy held, contested, and liberated zones, you have to understand that there are at least like over 1 billion Africans, and if you have that base of over 1 billion, 1.5 billion Africans who are united to defeat the structures that try to, that, as we mentioned earlier, that have divided us between, say, urban and rural, whether on the continent or in the diaspora, between different ethnic groups within the continent, or men, women, and non-men, or pastoralists and cultivators, like whatever sort of divide there is, you have to understand that all this is done to make sure that we don't recognize our strength. And so long, when you recognize your strength and you recognize the goal and have the ideology to make sure that you're confronting enemies that both look like us or don't look like us, that it's important to understand that. So
especially
you just have to
say that enemies that look like us and don't look like us. Like there's the
Yeah.
understanding that we're in an ideological struggle. It's not about, you know, how you look. This struggle is ideological, and if you Black and you contributing to the same type of oppression as a European, then you're the enemy.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think a few things that has to be understood for anyone who wants to label themselves anything, you know, whether it's a Black nationalist, Pan-African. If you, especially with Pan-Africanists, you can't say you're Pan-Africanist and you're not trying to internationalize the struggle. That's one thing.
Right.
That's one thing you have to like, no matter what field you're in, you have to internationalize the struggle. Like, you know, solidarity amongst Africans in the diaspora is strong, but I think to understand that for us to wage effective war and to win is, you know, right now, you know, we're underdeveloped. You know, we don't have all the resources. The resources is, you know, the people that hold the resources are, you know, the ruling class, the neo-colonialists, you know, petty bourgeoisie. Those are the ones who hold an immense amount of resources. And actually, the petty bourgeoisie is actually backed by the ruling class. They're the ones who own the means of production. So we actually need help from liberated zones, just to understand, like what everyone was saying, you know, from liberated zones to help us out in this effect, you know, to help us gain our liberation too as well. And obviously, you know, once again, this isn't to say that Africans ourselves, we can't also do something, but once again, it ties into understanding the material conditions of Africans and us not having access to a wide range of, you know, we don't own gun stores and gun shops and things of that nature, you know. We're going to have to get that from other places. And to also understand that, you know, funding too, you know, we're going to need money, you're going to need food, you're going to need other resources like that too. So it's going to have to come from somewhere. And obviously, it can't come from the people you're going to war with. They're going to actually, you know, impose sanctions on you. They're going to make sure that, you know, you don't have these things. They're going to bomb your crops and your fields to make sure that you don't have access to, you know, food and water and shelter and things of that nature. So it has to come from somewhere. So, you know, if other African nations, and also I understand that Africa is under neo-colonial control, right? So for the most part, like every state, you could reel it off, and you know, it's a you know, a lapdog there running the state. So I think that's one thing, you know, just to make sure we internationalize the struggle and understand that, we have people who can help us in the struggle too as well. We're not the only ones in this. So I think no matter what we try to claim, and no matter what field what title you're trying to place on it, I think that's first and foremost one of the biggest things that we have to remember is internationalize the struggle. And especially here with American exceptionalism running rampant. It's like, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Blame at China, pointing the blame at Cuba, pointing the blame at every other hand outside of America. Like
exactly. Yeah. So yeah, and I guess there's a lot of misnomers on Pan-Africanism. Once again, I think with us having to be in kumbaya and people people who don't really understand Pan-Africanism or don't really study it, just look at it as like, oh yeah, I have to get along with everybody and stuff like hold hands. And it's like, it's not, we don't have to like you, but we just have to have the same objective. I don't like everyone, and there's places I worked with, and I worked in the past, and I don't like everyone there, but I still had to work. I still had to, get along with and have, formal communication with some people because I may need some things, but that doesn't mean I get along with that person. Like outside of work, I probably won't talk to you. Like Pan-Africanism is essentially the same thing. Like I don't have to be best friends with you. We don't have to talk all the time, but if we have the same objective, we could, mutually understand that, okay, we have the same objective, let's work towards that. Once again, I think that's the understanding of interest. Where do your interests lie? Everything is political, right. At the end of the day. So yeah, that's probably, I think that's something that needs to get talked about a lot too, is, the misnomers on Pan-Africanism in regards to that. And yeah, I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Anything else to add to that?
Well, while you were talking, I was thinking about just the large amount of symbolism attached to, like, people think Pan-Africanism is reflected in maybe you got a Pan-African flag, or you got the shiki, or any type of like African. Not that those symbolisms aren't good or useful, but obviously understanding again that this is ideological and doing the historical study and understanding that this is something that's, as we talked about the Fifth African Congress, the Pan-African Congress, like all of these things have followed the history. So it's not like these movements are done in a vacuum. And then also to your point, like we have to internationalize the struggle. We can't assume that if we just over here and it's not other movements that's been doing this work, that makes our work less effective if we don't acknowledge and continually interconnect it all. That's why the confusion exists right now. Because again, people think, oh, we don't have to really do the research, or we can just accept the symbolism of Pan-Africanism. We can just cater to what the media shows us of Pan-Africanism, which is very little anyway. Because like, what we do get is usually just enough to satisfy a lot of people. But the masses, if the masses can have that awareness and understanding of why we stress the need for Africa to unite, going back to the material conditions of those in Africa and the labor that's being exploited. Once we have that massive, large understanding, you can't stop us, right? But if if those people assume that if we're in our own colonized area and we're being oppressed by this enemy, and we don't see that it's just this system doing it, then it's just going to minimize the effort to connect it all.
And another thing is that, as Jesse was saying, that that there are people who will dress up, who will dress in a shiki. They'll have a kufi hat, or they'll have a kente cloth, and they'll steal from you. So obviously the big example. He Africanized names, he Africanized his dress, but he's still the same person that was milking billions from the Africans in the Congo, and working with some reactionaries to put down liberation struggles in Angola and Mozambique. So you can dress the way you want, but there is of course there's always the cultural struggle that goes along with the material struggle. They're not separate; they are intertwined. But yeah, there's you understand the habit principle, and also understand at a point who might have a disagreement with, you'll still work with. I think of the example of China during the World War II, the communists and the nationalists, the Kuomintang. They worked against Japanese settler empire, and they worked together, and they fought back to fight each other. So it's possible that a socialist group and more economic nationalists who like they do Harambe or Ubuntu, whatever. They understand we want the land. We don't want the Oppenheimers to own this land. We don't want Elon Musk to own this land. We don't want that French dude that's like 100 20, 30 ports in West Africa. We don't want. The whole point is to make sure that we're in control, the masses are in control, and we get to decide. So.
Yeah, exactly, man. And I think that's very important. We were saying, like, regards to, like a dictator or a neocolonialist like Mobutu, I think it's always important to be scientific. One, just to add what I was saying earlier, is that, no matter what side you claim, whether you want to be whether you say you're Pan-Africanist, Black nationalist, or whatever, is to understand that the enemy is systems, right? It's like, we're trying to take down systems, essentially. We don't just try to take down a race, all right? Because it's like, we can get rid of, I'm not saying we can do it, but it's like theoretically or hypothetically, it's like, oh yeah, we could, get rid of all the Western Europeans or something like that, right? And eliminate them, but we're still going to have neocolonialism still there. We still have patriarchy still there. We're still going to have all these, all these systems and isms in place. So, irregardless of race, obviously, or whatever, we have to understand that we're trying to take down systems that oppress the people and the masses of Africans globally and success drive, and implement that with socialism, which is more equitable for the people at the end of the day. So I think people get confused and, target at one thing or say, oh, no, it's, or even try to individualize it like a few, like one or two people and say like, oh yeah, it's the head of this one bank or the head of this, and it's like, or every single. I mean, it's like, no, we're trying to take down systems because you can have someone of your own race. Weapon
capitalism. I mean, that's the thing. Like this whole notion that we can work with capitalism and be friends with it on occasion, be a part-time lover with. You can't be a part-time lover with capitalism. Like capitalism has never. I mean, exploitation is going to be there, and so the more you try to kind of curtail with it or flirt with it, it just shows itself to not be effective because you're going to find exploitation because it's all about profit. And I think so many people think, you even take, there are contradictions obviously in everything. You spoke with Marcus Garvey and some of your ideological differences with him, as I have as well. Like the whole reality though is that the masses of the people are under this oppressive system. We got capitalism right now. And it's not helping us, it's not improving our plight. And the more we think we could work with it, it just proves itself. It collapses on itself.
Yeah. And that's actually one of my differences with Garvey. I know he stated in his book that he believes that like capitalism is, the way for Africans essentially is coming up. I think he stated this in his the Philosophies and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. It was in that book that it was written at.
And some people would probably use that as a justification to further their capitalist interests. But obviously, if you look at the science, you see that we can't work. It's not going to work that way.
Yeah, a system that enslaved Africans isn't going to liberate Africans. Like, I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way, and it's still enslaving Africans to this day. Actually, not physically, but through wage labor and other means as well. So that's not going to liberate us. So I mean, do you guys have anything else to add in general before we wrap this up?
Yeah, and I also have to think as much of there is as we talked about how we are ancestors, that there is a continuity, and we should respect our ancestors, but at the same time we got to recognize there are places where there were contradictions or steps, or you understand their condition. So you can't just say, "Oh, I would have done this if I were back then," or "If I were Garvey, I would have done this," or "I were Nkrumah, I would have done this," "I were Winnie, I would have done," like, yeah, you could do this like intellectual masturbation all day, but at the end, like, there are people who still like working on the farm, but they can't sell like a little bit of like palm only because the big like European company is gonna like get their security on them, or they're homeless and to try to like squat somewhere and then they're gonna get kicked out by the police or something. Like, you have to understand that there is like anything, there's always these changes that understand where the respect for the ancestors and the strength from the ancestors, while understanding where we can improve and understand how to improve right now. And then once you do those, then they're going to come up new contradictions right there. So,
yeah. It continues. The work continues. Protracted. This is a protracted struggle. So it's not like, once we advance at a better point, we're going to have newer, as you said, contradictions. So yeah, it just,
the struggle don't stop, man. The struggle for liberation don't stop, man. And I think the moment you think it does, man, that's the demise right there. That's the demise right there. Yeah, man. There's so many different forces that come out. I'm just learning that through reading. It's like, man, it's it doesn't stop. Like, even Guinea-Bissau, they got liberated in 1980. They got overthrew because the Milcar Cabral's half brother took the presidency. Once he passed away, and they became liberated. And 6-7 years later, then a coup happened, and then you have even when with the PDG, Ture, when they became liberated in 1958. This one thing I respect about that whole thing is that they didn't celebrate, or they didn't want to celebrate their them being liberated. They understood the struggle continues. So even with that, they had multiple plots. They had the teachers plot, they had the Fulad plot, they had the anti-Guinea plot. So those multiple plots come in a succession, just like one after another. So imagine if they got relaxed, it was like, oh yeah, we got liberated, yeah, just raise the flag, and
right.
It's all good. You have to understand the struggle continues, man. A luta continua, right? So
I also think like what's happening in Zimbabwe, what happens when you don't have that sort of mass Pan-African either federation or unification. That what happens is they reach that I forget what was it called, the Stanley or something.
Okay.
We'll
drop it. We'll drop it in the description.
Yeah. They agree. They had the white minority in Rhodesia, and they had the Bush War by the ZANU and ZAPU against the Ian Smith led government, and then this with Britain, and then they were able to get to succeed, and then some moderates tried to integrate, and then it was like, no, it's not going to work. And then Mugabe and the ZANU that came to power in 1980, and you had the agreement to give the land to the Africans there. It took a little time. Obviously, the other things that happened, and then seeing what's happened in other places in Azania, what's known as so-called South Africa, and Namibia, they had the willing buyer, willing seller, and that was doing poorly. So then in 2000, they had the fast track land reform, and you hear all the Mugabe, they're just giving it to his buddies, or they're killing all these white farmers and blah blah blah, and then now then there was the coup a couple of years ago, and then they have and then there's this element with European farmers there. So, and you think about if there was an actual federation, like actual like common federation, it's not the whole continent, but it's certainly the South and Southern Africa, because the current SADC is kind of neo-colonial. So, so they had to like, so they giving money to people who took land from you. Let's think about that. Like if you actually had like a backing of other nations who saying, yeah, Zimbabwe has the right to give the land back to Africans, deal with it. So, but they have like outright compradors or sort of waivers who was like, yeah, it's like please get moved back. So they have to do these things in order to like, so the like hope that the sanctions won't. Yep, but think about it. They still have sanctions on Zimbabwe despite all this. And there's another point. It's a book called Fundi wa Africa, where they talk about
Wait, my bad. What's the name of that song again? Well, that book again? I need to write that down.
Fundi wa Africa.
Okay.
Where there's a short quote from talking about Mozambique. You might be heard what's happening in Mozambique right now, and I think it's part and parcel from this sort of neo-colonial aspect of the president after Michel Jacques Chissano is lamenting the fact that we give us socialism, but they still won't give us the West won't still give us aid. So another point, like, even if you do what they want you to do, there's no conditions they're saying that they're gonna provide for your interests. Right. So
yeah,
that's exactly. Again, that's another point for Pan-Africa. So you make your decisions, and if they try to, and not if, when they try to get back at you, you have the military, economic, political, social strength to do so. And because otherwise, you see what happens when they either have national bourgeoisie who like take like the vast majority of the aid or the riches from the mines, the farms, and so on, or you get some sort of isolation, and then at some point they say, and then you get all the see, socialism doesn't work. These Africans can't rule themselves. Right. So again, that's another point of this unification, because you need to have some backup, so you have support for that. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's not just ideal. It's like look at the history.
Yeah, man. It even takes it back to when I think of like the Ghana, Mali, Guinea Union, three countries that were striving for socialism in the 60s, unifying under that. And then, they try to make it broader with the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, which Malcolm X modeled after when he created the AAU, the Organization of Afro-American Unity. They try to replicate it, but obviously I think the efforts were strong to try to unify Africa, but at the time, most of Africa was ran by neo-colonialists trying to serve capitalist and imperialist interests. So that's where it kind of falls to essentially. But I think, we still see strides with trying to make, a unified Africa to try to express our interests. And we've seen glimpses of it, certain states, Guinea-Bissau and Guinea and Ghana and, Mozambique and so many other places, Burkina Faso and, like Ankara and stuff. So, we've seen glimpses of it. I think it's always imperative for us to study that and to also organize around these things too. It's good to study, it's good for us. Even myself, I put up like a million quotes online and books and stuff, and it's good I do that. But it's also good to ensure that you're organizing for these things. Like you understand these contradictions and you're fighting to eliminate contradictions, right? You're not just observing them and talking about them and rambling, right? Yeah, you're trying to do
an organization, hopefully.
Yeah, join an organization, fighting for justice and try to do the work. Once again, if you don't like what we're talking about. You hate, you hate what we stand for. You hate the A-APRP in our guts. There's so many other ones out there. Malcolm X grassroots movement. You have the Black Alliance for Peace. If you're on a continent, you have, some of the ones we named, like the PAIGC, the Democratic Party of Guinea, the PDG. You have so many other ones, that's out there. I know Nkrumah's daughter tried to, rejuvenate the CPP. I'm not too sure if that's still going on.
They're still there.
They're still around. Okay, yeah. So, no matter where you are, African, wherever you're watching this from, the main objective is to organize. Once again, we just don't say this as rhetoric and it's cool or it's a slogan. We say it because the material conditions our people require for us to organize. At the end of the day, so you read history, you know that's the only way we anyone has achieved power through organization. One person, Kwame says the best. There's no such thing as Rambo, Superman, right?
Right.
No one person's gonna liberate you.
Superman.
Exactly.
So much we're fed that, but yeah, we got to get together. We can only do it if we're unified together.
Yeah. So we definitely need to organize. So yeah, man. So yeah, join the organization. If there's nothing else, you guys have anything else to add?
I think, we said it all.
I wrapped it up good. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. So yeah, join the organization, and then lastly, we've done our last few episodes. I'd like to mention our comrade Jamilah. She's recovering a little bit better. She actually was in a bad accident in February. And she's been recovering. She had one of her legs amputated, and we have a GoFundMe and in all our descriptions over the last few episodes. So if you could please contribute, that would be great help by any means. So yeah, we would definitely appreciate that. So but aside from that, the struggle continues. Forward ever, and join the organization, y'all. Join the organization. If you didn't get anything else, if you muted this whole video and you just listen to the last 5 minutes, listen to this. Join an organization. Once again, if you want power, if you want unity, if you want to chill in Africa, with your feet up and something like that, and enjoy the fruits of socialism and all that, join an organization.
Hey, if you don't like the state, there are plenty of anti-state organizations. You can do that too. Whatever it is to gain power for the African people. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, y'all. Forward ever. See y'all next episode.